So I've done talk on Homer for Third Thursday like 2 or 3 times. Obviously, I like Homer. My hope is to try to get more of you to like Homer. So we'll see if I can succeed. And I know some people here do like Homer. I mean, who has read the Iliad and the Odyssey? You've kind of read it, little pieces. You've read it. Yeah, you've read it. No? You've never read the Iliad? Were you going to try this one? Maybe? Okay. I know, the Odyssey. Definitely a good one. Yeah.
What's that movie with Brad Pitt?
Troy. Troy.
Is that the same thing?
Well, it's based on the. So it's not the same thing that this was written over 3,000 years ago, originally. So it's based on that story of Troy. Yes. This is the War of Troy. That's what the Iliad is, or at least it's a few days at the end of that war. That's what it is. I was originally just going to read a couple of my favorite passages, and then my dad passed last Monday, and so I've been thinking about fathers a lot, and there's a lot in here about fathers. And then we went to the memorial yesterday, and a couple people here were there. It was a nice military service, and my parents got a little bit more Christian as they're getting older. There was always kind of like they were Christian, but they didn't really care. Now they're starting to care a little bit. So they had a minister over, and the minister came, and very nice lady. She said some words. She said a prayer, and she did the love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. That thing. Have you heard that? That's the Corinthians. And it was nice. I thought it was a nice thing. And it made me think of something I've been talking about on my show as I've been doing some comments on like right-wing people like Charlie Kirk and even Ben Shapiro. And even, I haven't done a lot of comments yet, maybe someday on objectivists. Because one thing I've noticed, and one thing that I think is starting to be what I'm standing for more and more in my intellectual career, is to not be a one-book person. And by a one-book person, I don't mean you don't read a lot. So Ben Shapiro, all these people, they read lots of books. What I mean is that you don't turn to your source of truth and wisdom and knowledge about the universe and mankind to just a single source. Even if it's Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, even if it's Ayn Rand's philosophy, it's just, so I turn to so many different things of poems and the Iliad and Dante and all these things that I find the gamut and helps me understand and cope with and deal with the a sea of troubles, as Hamlet says, dealing with the sea of troubles. So it just got me thinking about all that. So I decided to read a couple passages about Homer, and what I hope will happen is to help inspire people. If I have a mission, it's becoming more and more clear that it's to inspire people to not be a one-book person, to be a canonical reader, and really to develop your own canon, whatever that happens to be. That is a canon for you. And that canon is a list of books, of top books that are important to you, and that are great books for you, and that are kind of provide for a source during all the ups and downs and thoughts and understanding of the universe. And I wanted to get this on the record because I'll be saying this more. More and more, I think the Bible should be on that list. Not because I believe in the fundamental nature, but because of some things that actually I learned from Jordan Peterson about the psychological insights that are there. But my view is that, and I don't want to get into this, isn't about the Bible today. My view is that obviously I'm an atheist and there's just so much erroneous stuff in there, but there are good stories and interesting insights that are important not only for yourself and you. There are interesting insights, but it's also about understanding the actual world we live in. So I've heard this many times by objectivists that I love and respect, that like the Bible is not Western. And I'm like, the more I read and the more literature I read, I don't think that's true. I think the West really is this battle, and you have to take both sides, the battle between Greek ideas and Iliad, Odyssey, and the classical Greeks and the Platos and Aristotles. It is that, but it's also the Bible for better, for good, and for evil. And there's bad. And I think you cannot separate those things. So I think you should be reading a lot of these great books and add them to your list to understand the world that you actually live in. Dante, Chaucer, Cervantes, Milton, Shakespeare. That's kind of a setup for what I want to say about fathers, in that what it has allowed me to do in reading as like an uneducated, non-PhD, just a normal guy reading these great works, of reading from Homer to Ayn Rand, like really reading into it, is when I think about like this issue of our relationship to fathers and fathers' relationship to sons and sons to fathers, I put it into like different categories of how did the Greeks think about it? How did ancient Rome think about it? How did the medievalists think about it? How did the Renaissance Enlightenment think about it? And then what are people saying today, not just in literature and cinema, but in popular culture and in our own lives? And for me, it's then coming to a kind of truth of what I think about it. And, so for instance, I'm going to read a couple passages from the Iliad. And one thing that I thought was really unique about the Iliad that I didn't really realize until I put it into the scope was Homer really put fathers as full-figured human beings. And the connection between son and father is much more about fathers being a model, and the loyalty is actually to the model of their character and their courage and their wisdom. It's not as it becomes by the time you get even to classical Athens with Oedipus and Hippolytus and all these characters, where it becomes a lot more about the destiny, that they are the beholders of these destinies for their kids, in a sense. And you have to break away from that because Athens was going through some tumultuous times. Rome is when it really solidifies the relationship and idea of fathers, of what I think is the dominant view today, which is that they are the lawgivers, and you owe them duty. You have to, like, no matter what. I don't care if your dad's a piece of crap. It's duty. They called it pietas. It's where we get our term piety. And it's also in religious terms and pious of loyalty to the father. That's if you see that in Virgil's Aeneid in particular, but in all the Roman practices, their laws, their marriage laws, and how everything worked, it all centered around father as the lawgiver. In medieval time, it became much more about theology and the divine father, and then you have kings, and the father is the representative at home of this, and there's like a whole slate of this. Again, this takes a lot. We're not going to go into the whole scope from then to now, but I just want to give you a taste. In the Renaissance, you start getting Renaissance Enlightenment. So if you're interested, we're doing the Literary Canon Club. We're doing Middlemarch, which is George Eliot. It's mid-late 1800s. And when you read English literature, one of the things you get is you understand a little bit more about fathers as like they're really the center of everything, not just law, but they make all the decisions for the estate, inheritance, marriage, everything. And then class and social status all originates and stems from the father. And it's a very interesting perspective. And I think you can only understand that if you read some of the great English novels. And I would actually define, at least off just from the last week of thinking about this scope of literature, modern is really the loss. There's a lot about a kind of crisis of family that we are often hearing about that I think is kind of a modern, more modern view. Okay, so that's just a setup of like, it's important to think about these from a scope of history and how we've thought about these things, or how the best humans, the best thinkers in all different areas have thought about them. So I'm going to read a couple passages, and the first one I wanted to read is actually Hector to Astyanax. Now, just a pop quiz. Who knows who those characters are? Anybody know who Hector is and who Astyanax is?
Hector's like the prince.
Yeah. So if you saw Troy, Hector was played by Eric Bana. You saw Troy. So yeah, he's the Prince of Troy. Remember, Troy's being attacked by the Greeks. They're coming over there because Helen was abducted by Paris, so they're trying to get her back. And so Hector's the one of 50 sons of the king of Troy, Priam, and he's protecting them. Astyanax is his son, his little infant boy, and this has been one of the most tender, famous moments in literature. So the war has been going on before the Iliad for over 9 years. And at the start of the Iliad, you have a quarrel between Agamemnon of the Greeks and Achilles of the Greeks, within the camp of the Greeks of invading them. And Achilles says, I'm not going to fight. He's going to take his men and go home. And they try to settle things between Agamemnon and Troy, between the Greeks and the Trojans, after Achilles leaves. They can't do it, so the fighting starts again. So that's where we are now, is the fighting has been started again after a little brief moment of rest. And Hector, after some brutal battles, goes home to Troy to see his wife, his mother, Paris, and all of it. And one of the beautiful things about the story is just seeing the totality of his life. And you really get that in the story. So he comes home, he finally finds his wife. He's been searching around for her. They have a little conversation about how dangerous Achilles is, and nobody wants him to fight Achilles, but everyone knows he's going to have to fight him at some point. Here's what he says. So then Hector of the shining helm replied, all this I know too well, my dearest wife, but I would feel deep shame before the men and long-robed women of our Trojan town if I, like some base coward, stayed away, unseen among the brave who fight for Troy. My heart will not permit me this. I learned to always be courageous and to fight among the foremost warriors of Troy, to win great glory for my father's name. For deep within my heart and mind, I know the day will come when sacred Troy must fall and Priam's line and people will be lost. But more than all the pain of Trojan men, or even Hecuba's or Priam's grief, or that of all my brothers who will fall, it is your fate that weighs upon my soul. When some bronze-clad Grecian leads you off in tears, a captive bound for distant lands, to Greek lands, weaving at a stranger's loom, or drawing water from a foreign well, oppressed by cruel fate and harsh command. Then someone, seeing you, will say, behold, this is the wife of Hector, bravest one of all those horse-taming Trojan warriors. When they fought round the city, so they'll say. And you will grieve anew, deprived of me, a man who might have kept that day away. But let me die before I hear your voices or see you taken in such cruel distress. So saying, glorious Hector reached to hold his son, who frightened drew back, cried, and clung to his nurse's flowing robe in sudden fear. He shrank from shining bronze and horsehair helm, the crest they had on, that nodded fearsome from his father's helm. Then Hector and his wife both laughed aloud. At once, brave Hector took his helmet off and set it gleaming on the ground nearby. He kissed his dear son, held him in his arms, and lifted up his prayer to Zeus above. O Zeus and all you gods, please grant that this, my son, may be like me, a noble man, strong and brave, and ruling here in Troy. May people say he's greater than his father when he returns with treasures from the fight, and may his mother's heart feel boundless joy. Now, I think that's one of the most astonishing little verses, not only in this, but in literature because of how old this is. So of the works, so much of what you've already seen if you read through this, is all the loyalty and talk about duty and what you owe to your fathers. And here you have a little passage, and what is Hector really worried about? So he wants to be courageous for his father. He mentions that that's important. He spends the most time talking about what he worries about for his wife. And then there's a very tender moment about his son, who's afraid of the horsehair helmet because it's a war helmet. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's a spoiler, but you need to know it because all the Greeks knew it. And this would have there would not have been a dry eye in the house when Homer would have read this, 3,700 years ago or 2,700 years ago, whatever. Astyanax the name means hope for Troy. The Iliad is a story that everybody knew, the whole story of Troy and what was going to happen. And everybody knew the story ends with Astyanax being flung from the towers of Troy. So he's killed. So that's why Homer adds this little moment of the horsehair helmet. That's one of the reasons that he adds, many reasons that he does that, but it adds to the gravity of this moment. And it's like him saying, pay attention to what's going on here. Is about fate and honor and things like that. But I always just thought that, what's interesting is in that moment, you saw some of it. Hector is a father, he's a son, he's a husband, he's a friend, he's a brother. You'll see a brother. He's also a compatriot. He's so as a father and a character, and the relationship is not defined merely as father. And in other works, you do get Anchises in the Aeneas, for instance, and many other characters where they're defined primarily as fathers and what you owe to their fathers. But all the characters are robust, even in this ancient text. Okay, so that's one thing you get, is that when it comes to your relationship to fathers in the Iliad, sometimes it's about duty, and he does mention that, but often I think Homer's grappling with maybe it's not that. Maybe there's something more unique here, and I think he's dealing with so there's a line that he says here, I learned to always be courageous and to fight among the foremost warriors of Troy to win great glory for my father's name. You get a lot where it's like, it's about being a good model. That's what he's fighting for. He's fighting to be a good model, to defend Troy, but to be a good model for his father to be a good model as a king to him, and then for him to be for his son. It's not, God says, follow your father, honor thy mother and father. This is way before that. So that's one of the things I just love about this, is it's really about just be a good person, and then if your kids will hopefully honor you in that sense. Okay, so there's a lot more to say about Hector. He's one of the main characters. There's a lot to say about him. He's in the story a lot. So another passage that I think is probably one of the most important chapters in all of literature, I argue this all the time, it's book 9 or chapter 9 of the Iliad. And if you're interested, you can ask a question about why, but why I think it's the most important chapter in all of literature. But in this chapter, Achilles, who has shrugged, has said, I'm not going to fight. He has gone to his camps and he's preparing to go home. Now, Achilles has two potential fates that he knows about. He can go home and live a great life, get married, be a good king of his land in Pythia, and live out long, and then everyone will forget his name when he dies. Or if he stays in Troy, he will win eternal glory and honor, and everybody will know his name, and some bald guy in Texas will be reading about him in 2025.
He would die young.
But he would die, thank you, yeah, but he would die at Troy. That's an important part of the story, thank you. He has decided to go home, and Agamemnon and Odysseus decide they need to send an embassy, because they've been losing the war once Achilles leaves, that they're going to send an embassy of 3 men to try to persuade Achilles. This is one of the reasons why I think it's so astonishing, is that Achilles gives reasons for why he's doing what he's doing. And the 3 men are Odysseus, Ajax, who kind of represents the brothers at arms, and then a man named Phoenix. But Phoenix is a kind of surrogate father. So he left his land because he was banned, essentially, and he had a problem with his father, Phoenix's father. So he leaves his land and he goes to Pythia to under the household of Peleus, who's the king of Pythia, Achilles' father. And then he's taken in, and Peleus says, I want you to help take care of my son. And then when Peleus sends Achilles off, Achilles is only like 11 years old when he goes to Troy. And because he's fated to be the greatest warrior of all time. So it's like, yeah, you better go to this great war. So they send him off, but he needs a caretaker, and that caretaker is Phoenix. And Phoenix takes care of him. He teaches him in mind and speech to teach you all you must know. Is the edict he's given by Peleus to teach you of mind and speech, everything you should know. Odysseus, Ajax, Phoenix each give an argument for why he should stay. Phoenix gives an emotional appeal about, look, your father gave it to me. He says, and finally the elder Phoenix spoke with tears welling up in his gentle eyes. My dear Achilles, noble as you are, if you set sail and leave us here in Troy and refuse to stop the fires from our ships, then how could I remain behind with them? Your father Peleus trusted me with you the day he sent you far from home to fight. You were still too young to know of war, too young to speak in council with the chiefs. He sent me here to guide you in each way, in mind and speech, to teach you all you must know. Achilles, how could I, your second father, be left behind by you? I cannot leave, not even if the gods themselves had come and peeled away my age to make me young. Like when I fled from I'm going to go through the whole story. He tells a very long story about how he was kicked out from his father's home because of a quarrel that they had. And his father was kind of a bad person. So we get this sense, Homer's trying to teach us there's bad fathers and there's good fathers. And it's not a coincidence that Phoenix is a surrogate. So he's not even a biological father. So in a lot of later literature, and I think even to this day, there's just so much about this honor thy father that is not here. And he's really trying to say, yeah, your father kind of has to be a good person to earn your honor and courage and all the good things you have to say. Now here's what Achilles says after Phoenix tells this. It's probably like 5 pages almost of him telling multiple stories about why you should care about me, what I've done for you, and he tries to convey stories to Achilles to teach him. So he's actually trying to teach him what to do in this moment. And Achilles then responds with a sigh, "O noble Phoenix, my second father dear, I do not need this honor that you speak, for Zeus has given me my rightful share. As long as life flows through my chest with breath, I will be honored by my mighty ships. But hear me now, and take this to your heart. Do not try to stir my soul with tears by pleading on behalf of Atreus' son. I will not bend," that's Agamemnon, "nor will I fight for him. And if you try, I'll come to hate your pleas. Stay with me here. You may divide my wealth and rule beside me as if you were a king. The others may go back and take their leave, but you, dear Phoenix, you may stay with me. Tomorrow we'll decide if I return or if I sail back home far away from Troy." So what was astonishing to me was that there's this emotional appeal that's from Phoenix about his father, that he's the one you should, you pay homage to your father, you do what your father says. And Achilles says, I will hate you if you try to make me go against what I believe and have decided. I have thought about this and I've decided. And there's always a stress with Achilles that it's about his life. And it's breath in my body. He says this over and over and over again. It's his life. It's his decision. He wants to go home. He wants to, pursue his own values in a kind of thinking about an objectivist way, which I think is true. I just always find that astonishing that he says, and he loves Phoenix. He's saying, you could stay. I will honor you. I will take care of you. You can even rule by my side. But I have made this decision, and this is going to happen this way. That's one thing about the Phoenix. Now, so I'm going to skip all the way to the end. So that was book 9. One of the things that I tried to pare down on this version was all the patronymics and lineages that are expressed a lot. Now they're still here because I wanted this to be the Iliad, but I've pared it down and I have some rules to make it so have some rules in how it's portrayed to help you understand it. But a lot of times it'll be the son of this, the son of that, this person's brothers, sons, and laws of. It's like, who the hell are they talking about? Right? It's very confusing. So I really pared that down to help really make it as clear as possible who's talking about whom. But it's a lot about fathers and sons and loyalty and lineages. That's so part of the story. Now, the final one, the whole final chapter, I'm going to read the whole, no, I'm just kidding. No. Now, the full final chapter is about King Priam and Achilles. And again, it's one of the more famous chapters. And part of what happens is Achilles kills Hector. So he does eventually kill Hector. Spoiler. But you saw Troy. And so he drags his body around and around, and he leaves him out. Now, the gods protect Hector's body so he doesn't rot. Hector killed Patroclus, which is the friend of Achilles and his best friend. So there's a lot about Agamemnon as a leader and a kind of father of his people. There's a lot about all these different characters as fathers. And we hear a little bit about Priam. He's always in the background. We see him a few times, but we don't really dig into him until the final chapter. Priam, the king of Troy, the father of Hector, the father of these 50 sons that are being killed on the battlefield in front of him, right in front of the lands of Troy. Priam has gone into the camps. He's kind of snuck in with the help of one of the gods to meet with Achilles and to beg for him to give him back his son. That's what he wants. I want my son's body so I could bury him and pay homage to him so he can go to the afterlife that they believed in. King Priam entered quietly, unseen, and stood beside Achilles as he sat. He knelt and took Achilles' knees in hand and kissed those dreadful hands that killed his sons. Just as a man who traveled far from home after he's killed someone in his own land and enters in a stranger's wealthy house, and all inside stare, speechless at the sight. So was Achilles struck with deep surprise to see King Priam kneeling at his feet. His comrades also watched, amazed and still. Then Priam spoke, his voice both plea and grief. Remember now your father, noble prince, who waits at home as old and gray as I. Perhaps today he sits alone with grief. Yet when he learns you're living still, he's glad. Each day he hopes he'll see your face returned, his son from home safe from wars and foreign lands. But I am saddest, father of all men, for I once had the bravest sons in Troy. Now nearly all are gone, cut down by war. 50 strong sons I had when Greeks arrived, and now so few remain to comfort me. Noblest of all, my Hector, bravest son, died by your hand defending Troy from harm. For him alone I come unto your ships, to ransom home my Hector from your grasp, and rich and costly gifts I bring with me. Respect the gods, Achilles, pity me. Remember your father, grieve with me, yet still my sorrow far outweighs his own. For I have done what no man else could bear. I've kissed the hands of him who slew my son. If you were to read book 1, you get this whole thing about the duty and King Agamemnon starts off as I'm the king, give me everything. And all these kings are like this. And then you end this story with the king of the richest land and there is on his knees, begging for the one thing he wants in this world, which is his son's body. And these are the kinds of moments that I think are often unappreciated in some of these classic tales because we often get lost in all the names and who's translated this and what's but what I hope and why I hope you guys will check this out and actually try to read the whole thing is one, this idea I had about this source of truth, but that there's beautiful, tender moments. And this is, again, I can't stress how astonished I am whenever I go back to this about how it's so much about emotion and pity and grief. And it's not like when you read Christian doctrine and you read Virgil and Dante, how it's so much about duty and what you owe to your father and all these things. Homer shows that if this connection and seeing the human with this father, who, again, that's what the pity moment is about. It's about seeing him as a human. This is his enemy. They've been killing each other for a decade. And he sees him as a human being, as a father, and even you could have honor even among enemies in this case. There's a lot more to be said about it because it's more complex, but I just hope that gives you a teeny little taste of what's in this. That's just fathers. And I'll just end with this. The Odyssey is actually way better about fathers. So this is about war and death and life and honor and what's owed to you and what is the value of your life. The Odyssey is literally about Odysseus trying to get home to his wife and his kid, and Telemachus, his son, trying to find his way to who his father is and try to understand who his father is, who's been gone for his whole life, 20 years. So it's even more about that. I just don't have a translation about that yet, but I couldn't read that one. But I had this. Okay, so if you have questions, great. If not, I hope you'll go read this, and I'll hopefully have some club stuff, for Literary Canon Club for this again, if anybody wants to read it with us. And yeah, Debbie.
I have a simple question. So
Yeah.
were they Roman?
No, this is before the Roman Empire. This is like 1100 BC. So it's into the kind of echoes of myth and history. And it's a land in Troy. It's just called Troy. And it's no longer there. It's been demolished. They defeated it and burned it to the ground. But it's part of their mythos. And it's really the foundational myth in a lot of ways for the Greeks. Which means I think it's the foundational myth for all of us, whether we realize it or not. The story that's echoed. Yeah.
I thought you mentioned Zeus being related or somehow linked to Troy also. Did Troy also honor those gods?
So I focused on concepts of father a little bit. Give you a little taste of how they saw fathers as whole people, and that they're more about models and they're more about inspiring you and in giving you wisdom. It's not just about you pay to your household gods and whatever they say you do. They're the lawgivers. That's the law. I don't care how stupid it is. That's not the Greek way. The Greek way was much more about being a good model and a good person, and that was the purpose. So why I was saying that's just one basic concept is fathers. You could do all kinds of things. Gods is another one that I think is really interesting. So if you read the canonical works from Homer to Rand, but really Homer to Milton, if you read those works, they're like the biggest 10 books of those times. you'll start to get a real sense of how the concept of God changes. By the time you get to the first century, right around the time of Christ, and this is the time of Augustus, the first Roman emperor, you get Virgil's Aeneid, where the God is much more a booming voice. He has a little bit of character, but he sounds a lot more like the Christian God. These gods are so wacky. It's crazy. And you can only really understand it if you read it. But they're wacky. They're legitimately wacky. Hera like seduces Zeus. Yeah, she's super jealous, but at one point I'm sorry, what? She's crazy. But Hera, the wife of Zeus, seduces Zeus so that he won't look at the war for a little while and interfere, because she and Athena want the Greeks to start winning again. So she tricks him like he's a fool, like he's Al Bundy or something. Like if you ever seen Married with Children, like literally, it's like it's just so that the kids can go out and play or something like that. But they literally worship those gods. That's their gods. And when you start to see how it progresses in these big Western stories, I think you start getting a sense of how we got a Christian God and the concept of this one single booming voice. Because in the Aeneid, you get multiple gods, so it's still a pagan world. But when you hear Jupiter, who's the equivalent in Rome and of Zeus, he doesn't say a lot, but he'll say to Aeneas, "Why are you doing this with Dido and making love to this woman? Get out of here. You have a destiny. Go." And he's like, "Oh crap." Okay, and he goes, and that's it. And here they're like they literally fight gods in this thing. They literally wound a couple gods in here, the heroes. So it's just amazing to see, I think. Yeah, Bob.
So is your next project the Odyssey?
Well, so the way I've been thinking, yes, of course, I would love to do that. The way I'm thinking about it is like, this is kind of a product that I'm going to start pitching. I want to pitch to people. Do you like this? Is it worthwhile? Because yes, I'd like to apply it to more of these down the line and try to build a real business around it. So that's what I'm hoping to try and do. But I can't at this time this took hundreds of hours. It took a long time. I can't just like do that without start making some kind of revenue or something. So that's what I hope this is. That's what I really wanted this to be, is like, I want people to read that. You could read the first chapter for free. I'm trying to have like a web page. I'm trying to get people into it, do what I can do. But I've been saying this, trying to say it more confidently to my friends. I genuinely believe this is the greatest translation for first-time readers ever. I really believe that. So prove me wrong if someone wants to. But I really believe that. Yeah.
Well, making the greatest translation for first-time readers. You have a first-time reader that'll be coming into it and just
Sure.
the idea of the first-time readers in general. In your mind, what are you hoping that these first-time readers will get from reading this translation?
Well, that's a great question. First, to be clear, I think this is the Iliad. So that means that it's big. It is in iambic pentameter, and there is a lot going on. So when I say first-time readers, I really think probably 14, like freshmen, maybe junior high, could start reading it. I think 8th grade. I would prefer it in like probably high school, but I think 7th, 8th grade could do it. It is at like a 12-year-old reading level, basically where it's at. But there is complexities to it still. There's a lot of characters. Again, it's in verse. But I've tried to do things to help make it happen. There's a lot to say about education. We don't have time for all that. I would say I hope that more people will read things like Black Ships of Troy beforehand. Black Ships of Troy, is that what it's called? Black Ship Sails of Troy. It's like there's kid books that get you Dolores's mythology. Is that what it's called? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Oh, I thought you guys didn't have that. Yeah, there's like kids ones that I do recommend. When we were at LaPorte, they taught it there, that help to get you here. So this is still something you need to have a little bit of, literary experience with. But I'm very confident that 15-year-old could pick it up and read it and get a lot out of it. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Garrett and then Bob. I think. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, Garrett.
Yeah. So I've read, I don't know, maybe a third of the Iliad translated, but it was tough to get through. It was clearly translated like 150 years ago.
Oh, sure.
And so even the English was a little bit
Yeah.
jagged. But where do you feel like the existing translations fell short? Like what made you want to translate it?
Well, so there's the one that when we did a literary canon club, and I've done this with like I think 30 people we've read the Iliad, Odyssey, and some of the big ones with. I always recommend E.V. Ryu, which was recommended by Peikoff, and that's in prose, and it's more modern. And so some of the things that I did here was actually inspired by him. And I don't see a ton of that done well. What he did, although there's thousands of translations, and I do not know all of them. I mean, lots of people translate these things. What he did really well is, and I find like even looking at the introduction, I find this really fascinating. So if you buy the cloth-bound version that's out on Amazon, which is a good version, I recommend it. There's his 1951 or 49 introduction. Before that is his son, R-I-E-U review, and it's like 50 pages. He's an academic. And it's 50, 60 pages, and then his is like 15 pages, or whatever. And I just find that so representative of a lot of the problem. I think academia, their focus and goals are just so much different. Like even Emily Wilson, who has the more recent translation that came out a few years ago. I read through it, there's nothing wrong with it, it's fine. It's a perfectly decent one, but still she uses a lot of terms that's like there's more barriers you have to get to. There's a lot of Achaeans and there's a lot of the patronymics, which is relevant, but I just don't feel it's the most relevant. And I cut out a lot of stuff to try to make it as simple as possible without losing. So like in mine, for instance, it's always Greeks and Trojans. They don't say that. Now I will, because it's all the tribes of Greece. They all have their own names. There's like hundreds of them. And there's all the tribes and the allies of the Trojans. They all have that name and their name. So a lot of times it's referred to that, but 90% of the time, I'll just refer to it as Greek. And so I won't say the name that's there because it's just, yeah, and all those things. And it's like, sometimes I will when it's relevant. It's like, you don't want to say, the land of Greek for Achilles' land. When you're saying Apithia, you want to make sure it's clear. But I think for a first-time read, an ancient freaking book, it's just not necessary. But academics they insist on those kind of things. It's like they really want you to know all of these things. Like, yeah, when you get into a college, sure, yeah, learn those things. But for a first time and just an enjoyable read, a lot of that, and sometimes they'll name they'll give nicknames to people. Paris is Alexander, and so all of a sudden they're talking about Alexander. Like, who the hell is Alexander? And it just, why add to the confusion for a first-time reader? And I've seen that even with books like Emily Wilson's that are catered to first-time, like it says it's a modern read. E.V. Ryu does the best job of this. And even his is a little confusing sometimes. And I don't know that mine isn't at all confusing. That's why I want more, feedback. I'm sure I wanted it to be the Iliad as much as possible. So line by line translation, it's all the translation, but I did alter things to make it like a little bit clearer as much as possible.
Did you write it in iambic?
Well, so the process was this. I went like one stanza at a time through AI. So there's something called Perseus Library, which has all the Greek texts in ancient Greek as best as we have it. Wonderful scholars have done wonderful work for hundreds of years on this stuff. And it's a wonderful resource. And you can actually click on each word, each one of the Greek words, and it'll pop up the whole lineage, the whole etymology, and everything of every single word. So I used that, and then with ChatGPT and modern stuff, I went into it, and I had a specific amount of parameter of rules, and and one of them was I wanted some kind of initial iambic pentameter to get started with. It took a lot longer than I expected, but because it was not amazing at first, it would make lots of mistakes. But I went through that process over and over. Once I had like this rough translation, I went through it over and over and over again. And I did do a lot of like tweaking and like little iambic pentameter myself. But AI was pretty good at like helping get it into the iambic pentameter. But it made mistakes a lot. So like it often wasn't iambic pentameter. I was like, that's not iambic pentameter. So I'd read through it. I was like, no. So I was going like this a lot. I was literally doing that a lot. And by the one thing, this made me think of like something that might be fun for a high school class one day to do a translation like this. Because when I wrote a poem for my dad's funeral, And a lot of it, I was like, oh, this isn't iambic pentameter. I just naturally got into that. I didn't even realize like it was just a learning thing that happened. It was like, I would call it like a rougher one, and it was, to be in speech, not necessarily for a published thing. But anyway, that was basically the process. Long-winded answer. Yeah. So Bobby, do you have something? I'm sorry.
I just was curious, as far as your marketing goes, are you pursuing marketing it through movers and shakers and education, and more rational ones? I think that would
The
be
more rational. Yeah.
the venue for this more than anything else.
Well, I've come to really respect how difficult the project's going to be in terms of marketing. I'm up against like Oxford Press, right? That's that when you're looking, when you are going to buy an Iliad Odyssey. So like I went to there's a private school that I thought was a wonderful private school here, or they're a charter school. And I went and they all had the Fagles. They had hundreds of Fagles. That's one of the popular translations. And that's where you're going to go. And so like I'm going up against these behemoths within the industry. So, I mean, I have to prove to people through getting them to read it. I need to get one person to read it, two. It's really the beginning in so many ways of just getting people to read it. Because my argument is that I think of this as a product. I think one thing that like I noticed about Emily Wilson and Fagles, it's really about them a lot. And this, I want to be about this. This is a product that was developed that I think is the best product possible for this purpose. So it's going to be a grind, and I'm going to do my best. So I've been doing a lot of things. Like I have a YouTube channel where I've been doing each book. I'm doing a discussion of this, like each chapter of this along the way. I'm on like chapter 6, doing it on there, and the views are pretty decent. I mean, they're small right now, but it's one of the things that'll grow. And I'm constantly pitching, go read this. I'm reading this from my book. Go get the first chapter. And I'm getting some signups, but that's, building a community. It's what writers have to do in general these days. You have to build the community yourself. Not easy. Luckily, I have a little bit of a community. So you guys part of that, and I appreciate that. That's the start.
Like readings or something with the stories?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, so
How to go about that? Like I don't know the process of getting in.
Well, I mean, you could just email like book people. That's part of what I wanted to do. Start just emailing a couple bookstores. I mean, I'm just gonna go to coffee shops and work, and I'm just gonna have like a stack of books with that little sign there. And if anybody wants to talk to me, but I'm doing that while I'm doing all these other marketing things to try to get some. I mean, what I need social proof. That's critical. I need some people, especially respected people, like you're saying, movers and shakers, to say, yeah, this is a good translation. Because it can't just be me. I'm obviously selling it. Nobody believes me. When I say this is the greatest thing, they're like, what are you talking about, Kirk?
And
yeah.
for the story and what it holds is.
Yeah. Well, I want to pitch to anti-establishment type people. So the homeschoolers that are not a big fan of the establishment, because that's what I'm against, right? Or not against, but that's what I'm going up against. I really believe in it because there's a lot more I want to do. I'd like to do up to Dante, maybe even do Dante. Like I said, I want to do some classic ones. And then I really would like to do a mythology book. Like Bulfinch has always been an inspiration for me. Bulfinch wrote, before Edith Hamilton wrote mythology, which is a very popular one today, of like just giving you the basic of all the Greek myths. There was Bulfinch, who was like a banker, an insurance guy or whatever. He was just a business guy. But he was, trained in Latin like everybody else. And he just wrote all these myths. And I loved the way he did it. Where what he did was which is different than a lot of people, is he did kind of what I was doing at the beginning here, where I was trying to show you the inspiration of this one concept. I want to go through let's say Prometheus. And I want to show all the major influences on the idea of that Prometheus myth from Homer and Hesiod, it's a contemporary of Homer, to today. The great paintings, the great plays, and just kind of bring some of that out so people can get a scope of the influence of this one single story, of the scope of all of human history. That's a project I've always would love to have done, or would love to do at some point. So there's a lot I'd like to do in this world, but I just have to have that this was a product that I can hopefully pitch to people that they'll like, or say, Kirk, you're in the wrong place. Get out of here. which is also possible. But you guys tell me, read the first book at least, and let me know.
Going
So, yeah.
through this whole project, was there a book or a scene that you like that really stood out to you through this process that you hadn't had as much attention to, or you like fell in love with extra because of this?
I think that reading, it's hard for me to understand because I've read it now multiple times, obviously. So I'm trying to remember like what it was like to read this as like a teenager. Because part of what has happened in just me reading it and rereading it and translating it and going over and over and over is I now see things in it that I never saw. I just didn't understand. Even in reading multiple translations, taking courses, I've taken courses on it. I've gone through the 24-hour Gregory Nagy thing, so you can go to edX. There's a great, it's very difficult. It's like he calls it hour by hour, just each book basically. But it goes really in depth on it. He's one of the premier scholars of the Iliad of Homer. And you go for free at edX, it's on for free. But anyway, so yeah, what I just showed you, but my understanding of book 9 and like what has been changed of what was so important about book 9, chapter 9 of the Iliad, that came out of doing this and doing more research on it. And I more like astonished is the only word I can think of just how astronomical chapter 9 is in so many ways. And you've read chapter 9. That's the embassy. That's when they come to him to try to get him to come back. Because it's so I have an essay in here if you're interested called Achilles the First Individualist, which after, I've learned from Peikoff, so he kind of started this for me. He did some stuff in the dim hypothesis on this. He's the first one who I heard the idea that Achilles shrugged. That's from the dim hypothesis. The more I studied this, the more I studied Achilles as a folk hero before the Iliad. So Achilles was a known hero, very well-known hero. And Homer does some very interesting new things with him. One of the things is making him individualistic and shrugging in that way, but really the reasons for it is his own desire to live and enjoy his life. And there's a real stress on that. And I think that's something Homer or whoever that person was added. So that's one of the things that like just the more I learned about it, the more I was like, this guy is such an inspiration. Socrates talks about Achilles when he's in his apology. He references Achilles as his individualism. He's doing things he says something like, whenever you do something for your own values, Socrates, I quoted it in here, like, whenever someone decides that doing what's best for himself is more important than obeying what's accepted as right, he must be ready to face danger. That's Socrates. So again, Achilles becomes this model for how to live your own life. And I think he really is the first individualist. That I didn't really have that understanding until I did this project. So, yeah. Okay, I think we're about time. Any last things? Are we good? Okay. Okay. This last one. Thank you.
Nothing to do with this.
Oh.
But I didn't know how you felt about like potentially rereading what you wrote for your dad. Because I thought it was lovely. I don't know how I feel about that. You can say
So
no,
I
would love to hear it.
I just thought it was beautiful.
Totally not expected.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You can say.
So I wrote a poem for my dad's memorial service called My Father's 50 Roses.
It was
Yeah,
so
it's well, thank you.
Well, I can wait if you're planning to share it.
It's really great. It's like beautiful.
Okay. So this is called My Father's 50 Roses. So as a boy, I still remember the sting there in my father's rose garden. He loved those 50 rose bushes. One time I remember an older boy clipped a bud, presumably for his girl. My father was watching from the kitchen, and you'd think maybe he'd let it slide. Well, you obviously didn't know my dad. He was fiery. He bolted from the kitchen, flung the door ajar, and the boy turned whiter than the rose. He ran, but my dad did not pursue. It was enough that other boys would not filch any more roses. Most weekends, he was out there in the California sun, clipping and mulching and pruning and watering. Whether or not those rose bushes would have won any awards didn't matter. They were beautiful, they were blossoming, and they were his. My father grew up in a divorced family. His mother moved to California, and his father stayed in Buffalo. He often lived in the projects there. Once when we visited Buffalo after his father died, he took me to see some of the places he knew as a kid. He took me to his old neighborhood where the projects had been, but were run down now. I noticed one thing about all the places we visited that day. There were no rose bushes anywhere in sight. My father went to war after high school. He had attempted to avoid being drafted into the Army by joining the Navy. Lots of boys did that, which made it competitive for the good jobs. He never told me much about those times, except he did tours in country and had shrapnel in his arm and orange in his system. I know very little about his time there. There was one photo in the military newspaper of my dad carrying a young child in one arm. I don't know war because of him, but I do know my dad was a hero. I don't know much about the country of Vietnam, but I somehow doubt he had rose bushes on base. I did not know my father before the war. His family in New York always told me that I was a lot like him before, laughing a lot, jovial, good-natured, fun-loving, loves the ladies. He was in band and he was kind-hearted. I saw that often growing up, but I only knew the man touched by war. There was a darkness, a sadness, a chip on his shoulder for the rest of his life. My father survived war, but never escaped it. He went to college and took up photography. He always had beautiful photos all over the house. When I was in high school, I took a photography class. You can imagine my surprise when a photo of my father on his motorcycle was in our textbook. My dad's crew back then worked with and learned from Ansel Adams. He witnessed ugliness, but captured beauty. And that's how he met my mother, capturing beauty. I don't think there can be a happier man than my father on his wedding day. Of course, I've only seen pictures. He settled into sales jobs and businesses, bought a house, had a family, and grew roses. He loved to tell stories, and I'm pretty sure he laughed hardest and loudest at his own stories. But growing up, there were often friends over. He would tell the same stories over and over again. The one where Grandpa Hoogie accidentally got drunk in Los Angeles, or my Aunt Irene stopped the car in the middle of a busy freeway to turn around. And always, he loved showing off his rose bushes. And I always felt his life went up and down with the nation. He was born to a war bride. He grew up split between two coasts. He was young and fierce and free and dangerous on his motorcycle. He struggled in the 70s, started a family in the 80s, flourished in the 90s, and got really sick in 2000. That orange in his system was catching up. He never went back to his rose garden. He moved and he left it behind. He was a giant to me, but one day he lay down on the couch and never really got up. He had good moments, but the brightness was dimmed. Now, I know this quarter of a century had many good times for him and a few news stories. He bought another motorcycle and rode with his wife. I rode with him a few times too. He told me many things, but one I'll never forget. It was a new school year, maybe 7th grade. Before I left the car, he turned and said, it's every father's wish that his son is a little better than him. Then I left. But I always think of that in his blossoming rose bushes too. As a boy, I still remember the sting there in my father's rose garden. He loved those 50 rose bushes, and he loved the 51st one too. That was it. Thank you. Now you guys can go. I know you don't have to stay in here, but thank you. Okay.